So, for those of you at home that haven't come to join us here for these chats, my name is Lorraine Maher. I am currently artist in residence at Access in Ballymun in Dublin, because I know that there's some people in the UK that are watching in tonight. Well, over the last few weeks, I've spoken to a number of different people. As part of my residency, I'm really looking at who I am as an artist, and really looking at what art is, what defines arts and culture, and looking at the implications of othering, like really exploring the social and cultural implications of othering in the arts. You know, because for me, it's about creating a dialogue around access, inclusion, and representation. And I'm like so excited tonight to have an amazing guest with me. I've heard wonderful things about her actually from all of the people that I've spoken to this week. So that leaves me feeling really hopeful to begin with. So before we go any further, I am just going to hand over for you to introduce yourself, Maureen.
Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks for having me. So my name is Maureen Kennelly, and I'm the director of the Arts Council, and it's a role I took up in middle of April. So I'm nearly at the 6-month mark, I think. And before that, I had a range of jobs in the arts. Most recently, I was the director of Poetry Ireland. I was there for about 6.5 years. So looking forward to chatting.
So, I mean, you've taken on your role at such a challenging time, actually. You know, on one hand, we've had all the restrictions around COVID, and then obviously we've had like a worldwide response to the Black Lives Matters agenda. Both of those things like having such a massive impact on the job that you do, and you know, and on the organization that you represent. But before we start talking about that, Maureen, can you just tell me about your own arts journey? Like, one of the ways I've been describing myself most recently is being a non-traditional artist, because I think particularly in Ireland, when we think about the arts, everything feels like it has some kind of something traditional in order for it to really feel like it's mainstream. So I'm just interested in your journey. I know that you've been at Poetry Ireland, which actually is amazing, and that really is a space actually in the land of poetry, to bring tradition and non-tradition, and lots of things in between. So tell us about what's gotten you to where you are now.
Okay, so I'll go back really far, if you don't mind, just to make myself sound really ancient, but I suppose just in terms of tracing my journey and telling a little story along the way, which hopefully will be half interesting. So I grew up on a farm, and we grew up in a very remote part of North Kerry, and we lived a mile off the road and a further mile again from a village, and it was a very small village. And so I grew up feeling that I was just so far away from the center of anything, really. You know, it was the time, like it was the 70s, when because it was a farm, we worked all the time on the farm. You know, we just felt like that you were completely tied to your work there. And so like the idea of getting a lift from your parents to go anywhere that seemed vaguely exciting was a big thing, you know. Like, this is a common story for lots of people, I think, living in the country, you know. So yeah, so that feeling of kind of being remote from things is something that I've only come to realize in recent years has really kind of informed me in terms of my interest in making sure that people belong. Like, almost, you and I talked the other day just about outsider art, you know, growing up in a place which isn't a natural home for the arts, as I thought, even though now that I look back, I see I had so many privileges and so many, you know, things that went my way along the way. But that feeling of being away from it has really informed my approach to feeling that the arts absolutely need to be available for everybody, you know, because they weren't necessarily that readily available for me. And one of the things that very much informed my own interest in literature and reading was the fact that the mobile library came to our village every 2 weeks, and I absolutely adored it. This was just like the shining light in the fortnight for me, and I used to love galloping up the stairs and spending hours in there and getting the maximum number of books, you know. And so again, at the time, and you know, soon after, I wouldn't have realized what a big important thing that was for me. But in the last 10 or 15 years, I've realized, wow, that was an incredible intervention when I was age 8 or 9, you know, because it just led me on a path to reading, gave me a gift for the rest of my life, which is just invaluable. And then also as I was, I suppose, going for this job in the Arts Council particularly, I was obviously gathering all my kind of CV material and thinking all my thoughts and gathering the armory. And I was thinking about when I was age 14, that my mother took me to the town of Listowel, which was 10 miles away. And again, this would have been a big deal. And she took me to a touring production by Druid Theatre Company of a really well-known play, Conversations on Our Homecoming, Tom Murphy's great play. And the fact that I was exposed at such an early stage to such quality drama was a really good intervention. Again, you know, it's something to witness that standard of performance and production was a really valuable thing for me. And I went on to work briefly with Drew then in my early career. And another thing that I wanted to mention was that Listowel Writers' Week is Ireland's first dedicated literature festival. So again, I had the opportunity, because I had parents who didn't think it was such a mad, wild thing to want to go to a poetry workshop at the age of 14 or 15. So I was exposed to that. So I regard those as all really fortunate steps along the way. And so I studied arts administration after a few years kind of traveling a bit and working in telesales and so on. And this was the early 90s and jobs weren't in plentiful supply, but I managed to start a career in arts administration, having studied it for a year in Galway, worked with Druid, and then worked with a number of other organisations like Fishamble Theatre Company, which was called Pigs Back, Kilkenny Arts Festival. I freelanced for a while. I worked with a range of people, including local authorities, and I worked with the Arts Council briefly. And I worked as artistic director of the Mermaid Arts Centre, which is like Axis, and would work very closely with Axis in their work. And freelancing again, went back to college for a bit, back to Galway. I've traveled a lot around the country. I've been very lucky that I've been able to be flexible like that. So it's great. So I've seen kind of the rural and the urban side of things as well. So, I mean, yeah, look, I regard myself as being overly endowed with luck, because there were just those really critical things and events and openings along the way that happened for me. And like, they have made me have this fantastically rich career. And I guess, you know yourself, working in the arts, it all spills into the personal, and you know, often there's a blurring of lines between your kind of social life and your work life. So it has allowed me to have a really satisfying life that'll continue all going well. So so I see the riches of what I've been allowed to have. So I'm evangelical about making sure that others who want them can have them too.
You've had such a rich career. I'm excited even hearing about the career, because I've even thought to myself, and I think this is one of the reasons that I am feeling a bit challenged about how I even talk about myself as an artist, because I've had a kind of a full journey also, and in lots of different art forms. And you kind of think, you know, sometimes when you talk about having done loads of different things, I sometimes feel like, do people think then that's jack of all trades, as opposed to really, you know, being gifted in one? But I think that there is a real gift in having that rounded view and having had experience in lots of different places. What's your thought on that, Maureen?
Yeah, I completely agree. Like when I started out, I would have thought, oh yeah, I'm interested in literature primarily, and theatre, very, very interested in theatre as well. But because like my work has been very much cross art forms, say particularly in Kilkenny Arts Festival, when I started there, I hadn't been exposed to an awful lot of classical music. And became exposed to it through that festival, and to the visual arts and many other forms of music as well, and dance, and like every art form basically was involved there. And yeah, that has been incredibly enriching, because you just, I mean, it's empowering for yourself to learn more and to experience more brilliant events and works and so on, but it's also just the enrichment that you get from different people working in those different disciplines. And I mean, it's a sweeping statement, but I mean, I've been very lucky in that, like, the vast majority of people with whom I've dealt have been of the kindest, most courteous, most imaginative, most really energizing people. And when you see that there are so many common concerns, and that, like, one of the things I loved doing all along the way was connecting people. I think that when you come from a small place like me, you're always keen to connect, because, you know, your urge to get away makes you think, okay, who's going to, what are my steps to get out of here, or to, you know, get on to the next adventure. So I've always loved doing that, like connecting artists from different art forms, and, you know, hearing something and thinking, oh God, yeah, X will be interested in that. I must put those two together. That's been just one of the most thrilling aspects of my career today, to be honest with you. So, you know, thinking about the Arts Council then, and obviously you're looking after every possible type of artist and arts organization, and every type of audience member as well. And I mean, that's what's critical for us, is that wide range, that panoply of experience gets in there, is allowed to get in there. So yeah, I've always we use the term silo. I mean, it's almost a cliche now, you know, but like, we can't be siloed in the way we think, you know, because there's so much to be gained from the different experiences that artists of every type and every range have, that we need. It's that idea of the whole melting pot of experience and background that's really going to enrich us, and that's going to see us through, especially through the current crisis, I think.
Maureen, that's all like music to my ears. But so just for those that are listening in, I just want to say that anyone that we invite here for a chat, anyone that I invite here for a chat, I'm always saying to people, you know, it's really informal and really honest, and I'm really getting that from you, Maureen. So first and foremostly, thank you for that. But my own honesty is that tapping into my own bias. So being a younger woman growing up, I grew up in Carrick-on-Shore in County Tipperary in Ireland. Give it a plug as much as I can, especially we're great for the cycling. But Maureen, for me growing up, when I thought about farmers for me were the posh people. Like, they always were the posh people. Even if they were really struggling farmers, they were the posh people. And so if me in a younger years, even knowing that you grew up in this, you know, in a farm, in a rural place, I would have expected that you would have had access to the arts in a way that I might not have. Like, it wouldn't have been that surprising for me that you might have had that kind of place. And for me, kind of growing up, we had the Amateur Operatic Society. They still do like incredible shows in our town, incredible. And it's a real community kind of time where everyone comes together and, you know, creates the set and whatever. But I still never felt like there was this place for me within all of that. It's ironic, you know, listening to you talk about literature, and literature being such a part of the arts in Ireland. But, you know, I'm dyslexic, quite badly dyslexic, even though, you know, worked as an education manager, which feels ironic because being surrounded by paper when it was like the dread for me kind of growing up. So all of those things felt like barriers to me. And because of my dyslexia, I found it difficult to learn the Irish language when I was in school. So my Irish teacher decided I didn't need to do that. I could just hang in the back of the room. It didn't make any problems. I was fine. So it's almost like all of those things put together meant that along the way, other people were deciding on what my access might be to opportunities. And when I think about the arts, like I would have never thought about that as a career when I lived in Ireland. I found the arts when I left Ireland. Although I would say now, in hindsight, looking back, there was always the arts around us. You know, I grew up in a house where they had sessions, people sang, people told stories. I remember dressing up and, you know, when I was 11 or 12 in the youth club with a friend of mine, and we'd do little skits. I remember all of that, but still would never have defined it as the arts. because the arts to me was this kind of mainstream thing. And we heard about people, you know, they're above in Dublin. And if they're above in Dublin, you knew like they made it because they were above in Dublin. And the thought that I would ever get to even see anything that was made that would be on any stage in Dublin was so far removed. Maureen, what's your thoughts about what kind of, you know, what place the arts have when you're thinking about mainstream arts? Do you think that the arts is elitist in Ireland?
Yeah, no, I do. You know, it's very mainstream, middle class, white, fully abled. It's like, it's striking to me how much it is. And you know, when I first started working in the arts, outreach was always the term that everybody used. You know, I must think about my outreach activities. And I remember, you know, it was definitely an add-on. It was like, oh God, that's something I must do because the Arts Council will like me better for doing it, you know. And it was definitely a kind of a, you know, 2% thing that you might think about on the Friday afternoon sort of thing, you know. And I think we've come a long way, because now I feel that people are really beginning to grapple with it and to think that they want to do it, that they absolutely see, they don't feel it as a diktat from on high. I think that people actually, because they see that, gosh, this is lived experience. How can I be part of an organization that automatically excludes so much of the population? You know, like, it's staggering. Like, if you said, oh, well, you know, you can only play soccer if you're XYZ, if you're from this part of the population, that's the only way you can play soccer. You know, I mean, we can't put up with it. It's so obviously elitist, still elitist in part. And now that's not to deny that there are people who are doing brilliant work to change it. But like, you know, we've got to accelerate that change, because like, it behoves all of us to make sure that the Irish arts experience is representative of Ireland, because otherwise it's half-assed, you know, it's not reflecting Ireland. And when you leave so many people out of the story, like, if in 20 years time, and like whoever, or the people who follow us, or the younger generation, are saying, oh God, tell us about COVID, what was that like, you know. and if we're telling that story through the arts, and if that is a very homogenous reflection in the way that it's told, that's going to be a big disappointment. You know, we have a real opportunity now. And obviously Ireland has changed hugely in terms of ethnic diversity in the last 20 years. And people are, and you know, that's causing us then to think about all the other marginalized communities who've been left outside for so long, you know. So it's actually put a lot of pressure on, I think, you know, in a good way, that people are starting to think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that actually this happens, and that, you know, only 3% of applications for one of our schemes last year were from disabled people, yet the 13% of the population in Ireland is disabled, you know. So obviously we have a huge job of work to do ourselves. And I have to say that we have a great team with two fantastic women, Monica Corcoran and Almond Daw, leading out for us on this, you know. And they realise how urgent a task this is, you know, and they've set about putting in place really good steps to make sure that, first of all, we acknowledge where the gaps are, you know, and that we start measuring our data, and we start setting targets for ourselves to say, okay, it's 2% now, and we need it to get to, you know, 6% next year. And, you know, that we keep on the case, and that that it's embedded in absolutely everything we do, that our own structures, our board, our staff, who we fund, the artists, the arts organisations, who we communicate with, that it's embedded right across the organisation, this absolute impulse that we have to represent Ireland more fully, absolutely fully, and that we make sure that that we believe it's a human right that everybody in Ireland has access to the arts, but that we make sure that that's absolutely clear in everything that we do ourselves. So, you know, it's a fantastically energizing prospect. It's absolutely brilliant. And like we need to throw the gates open wide. And that's what we've been trying to do in the last, say, year and a half in particular. We introduced the policy in summer 2019. So, and I know you were part of that yourself in Galway, part of the conference, Places Matter. So just in August now, just last month, barely last month, Alwyn and Monica took on the process of consulting really far and wide with people who have felt marginalised from the arts and from the Arts Council, you know, and these were really good, robust discussions. People are being really frank with us, which is brilliant. Like if people aren't being frank, we simply can't learn. And I guess it's this idea, going back to like the kind of outsider feeling, you know, my own silly feelings of feeling remote from things, you know, but people feeling that they're left outside, that they don't have the social capital or they don't have the human capital in order to engage with us, you know. And so that feeling that, I mean, we know how Ireland works. It's this like necklace of connections and like a lattice work of things that grow up alongside you and that you can engineer and you can use to great effect, and that's good if we're all good networkers. But when you're not, and when you're thinking, God, and how do I actually get into that club, or how do I enter that room? So, you know, like that, I think it's staggering when we think of all the people who hang back because they think, you know what, that's not really for me. I'm not feeling confident enough today to enter into that arena. And when we think of all the lost experience along the way, that's kind of frightening, I think, you know, because there are people out there who not just to create the work, but also to actually experience the work. And like, we know what a force field the arts can be in terms of, you know, you can enter a poem and you can think, oh my God, I actually feel changed after that, or this is something that's going to help me for the rest of my life, or, you know, these are mind-bending, transformative experiences that we can all have. And when you think that there might be a whole swathe of the population there that simply feels they can't access it, I mean, that to me is frightening. So, you know, that's the job of work that we're on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that you were saying there that really kind of resonated with me. And one of the things I was thinking about, so it at the beginning of me and thinking about this residency, it came from a place of being really frustrated about always being other. And that came from a place of the Irish census and kind of looking at what it was to be Irish and finding that in Ireland on the census, you could be two colors, you could be white, you could be black, you could be Asian Chinese, you could be other, and I'm always other. And you know, you've mentioned there's been kind of changes in the landscape in Ireland in the last 20 years, but I've been around, you know, I also was playing those games in the 70s. I've been around from the 60s, so like we're not that new, and yet there's still no place for me to just be Irish. And that feels like it's reflected globally. I mean, people are probably sick of hearing me saying this because every opportunity I get, I'm kind of saying, you know, the census across the world always shows Irish people as being white. And alongside that, we still globally, we have this thought of this is what Irish people are. And this is what Irish arts and culture is. We saw a little while ago where we had Morgan, African-American Irish dancer, blew up all over the place, people talking all about it, like, why shouldn't she be doing Irish dancing? I did Irish dance. I mean, there's lots of other people that would describe themselves as black or brown that do Irish dancing. And equally, when we think about people who are Irish people, who are artists, musicians, dancers, sculptors, ice sculptors, tattooists, whatever, you know, I mean, for me, I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, actually. For you, what is the breadth of arts? Because for me, that's just massive. But the people within that come in all shapes and sizes, all abilities, and that brings a diversity with it in terms of what's created. But yet, when we think about kind of exporting Irish arts, there always seems to be a parameter around what that is. Is the Arts Council currently doing any kind of work to change that narrative?
Yeah, we are. Like by encouraging people who would never have thought to come to us before to say, look, these are awards and schemes and these are open, but we need to do an awful lot more work on it, you know, because a common kind of refrain you'll hear about us, Lorraine, I'm sure you have heard, is that, you know, the forms are so difficult, and
I was
you
going
know,
to say that, yeah.
I'll take that one definitely. And you know, for people who haven't applied before, it can seem horrendously forbidding, just like, oh god, I'll never get through, like I can't even read those guidelines, you know, and not to mention filling in that application form. So we do, and we're really conscious of that. And we have this big IT project. We're going to be changing the whole system next year. It's a big deal. It's been long planned, and that's going to offer us a real opportunity to streamline things right back, so that we can seem a friendly, open, welcoming. Okay, that doesn't look so forbidding. You know, let me try that. And that's, you know, that's a very simple, but that's a very direct way that we can actually make sure that we are more open to people, and we invite more people in, you know, invite people to engage with us. So that's in that end of things. But then in terms of what you say, like, yeah, I completely agree. It can seem like this very monolithic kind of, oh, that's what Irish culture is. You know, that's a very easy definition. By encouraging our partners, the people whom we fund, to think far more widely. You know, they're the ones who are out there doing brilliant work, going to change the landscape, like by throwing the doors open wide and saying, okay, let me just show you exactly what's there, you know. And they are, again, you know, it's not as quick as any of us would like, but it will, you know, the work is coming through, I think, you know. And like, we have been asking organizations in a far more concentrated and deliberate way now to tell us about what they're doing in the field of equality and diversity. So and as I said, like before, I think people are far more alert to it themselves in any case, and I think they genuinely want to be. They're not just wanting to take a box, think, oh, that's grand, the fund will be on my case if I don't do this. You know, I think people are recognizing that, of course, it's to everybody's benefit, naturally, like it's a human right, but also we've so much to benefit. Like, we have a lovely, beautiful, diverse, broad society, and it's only to our enrichment to show that at its very best, and to make sure that every facet of society, not just the arts, has to be so representative of it, has to, you know, just show it in its full glory, so that, you know, we can all kind of live together in a much more mutually enjoyable and beneficial way. And I mean, I do think it paradoxically, this pandemic has us all like indoors more, but actually I think that's causing us to think more. I think it is causing us to be more empathetic and to think inside each other's skin, and to think, gosh, I wonder how he or she is coping now with this, you know, and to think, okay, their set of circumstances could be really challenging. And I think it will open people up to show that kindness to each other far more. I think, you know, not to be Pollyanna, God, I mean, it's wreaking havoc on people's lives, of course it is, and it's dreadful sadness and dreadful worry and concern. But when we do come out of it, which we eventually will, of course, I think that there will be a renewed sense of purpose about how do we live a good life in Ireland, and how do we properly appreciate each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of me feels like we're more connected than ever, because, like, you know, when I'm not at home, I don't get to go out on a Saturday night with my sister, whereas now I can. You know, we can sit. We're not really out. We're out is in the garden. We're not out, but we're getting to spend time together. I'm getting to spend time together with people that are living kind of all over the place. I'm getting to work with and to experiment with artists that live all over the world. One of the things that really struck me, and it was this week actually, so I was working on something, I was working on a storytelling project, and obviously, you know, we're going into Black History Month. I'm starting to work on some stuff around that. We're looking at storytellers, and I was talking to a few storytellers about, you know, telling Irish stories, and one of them said to me, can we tell kind of Afro-Caribbean stories? They're the stories I like to tell. And the person was someone who, like myself, is mixed race, has, you know, a native white Irish parent and a black parent who was also born in Ireland, so also identifies as Irish, but wanting to tell the stories of the Caribbean. And I remember, you know, having a conversation with someone else. They were like, no, you know, we want Irish stories, but actually right now for that person, that is an Irish story. And even for myself in the moment, I was like, okay, you know, I didn't even question it that much in the moment. And then afterwards, the more I thought about it, I was like, actually, that person is correct. That is now an Irish story. That's their Irish story. So, you know, when I suppose what I'm thinking when I'm just, again, I go off of my own world sometimes, Maureen, but what I'm thinking about is kind of the tools that are being given to organizations to enable them. Because like when someone applies to the Arts Council or any other funder, you know, we have all this criteria that we have to sign up to. We have all the outcomes, we have all the monitoring, we have all of that. And there is often this kind of fear when we say we're going to be working on this Irish project, that we are, again, churning out this particular work. So is there, like, I know you have the diversity policy, so I am going to ask you, for anyone that's listening into that and don't really understand what the diversity policy is around, so if you could just kind of talk us through a bit of that. But is there a toolkit or kind of a training offer or something that's, you know, a broader offer that has been given to people to help them to start thinking? Because for me, I feel like whenever, certainly with these talks even, I'm always asking people to give a gift to, you know, organizations that might be listening in, that want a bit of knowledge or want to be connected or want to think about stuff, or even just want to ask the question. Because I know that sometimes with all the best will in the world, people want to be inclusive, people want to be representative, but they often don't even really see what's in front of them in their own communities. So is there any kind of support or whatever around that?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, toolkit, we are developing one. It's going to be ready, I think it'll be early next year. So I shouldn't overpromise. So yeah, we absolutely recognise, and that is one of the actions out of our equality, human rights and diversity policy. So we have a 3-year action plan attached to the policy. It's on our website, and we have and it's in Irish Sign Language there as well. And we have it translated, a shorter version of it translated to 10 different languages. So we're trying to make it as accessible as we can. And the key things in it are like about representation, you know, back to who we are, how do we, you know, truly represent modern Ireland on our board, on our staff. We've a huge journey to go on that, I have to confess, you know, but we have it there as a real objective. Who do we fund? Who are the artists whom we fund? You know, and again, it's, you know, all the time trying to push out, you know, because we can't just sit back and say, that's grand. We have a scheme out there, so that's fine. And we've told like, oh, we've told a whole pile of diverse people to apply for it. It'll be grand, you know, like we absolutely know that, you know, there's so much engagement that you need to do, because all those barriers, the glass ceilings that people feel, you know, like, oh, well, that's not for me, you know. And I suppose that is something that I have felt all my career that I've been really focused on, is like building a bridge between the arts and the public. Because when you don't come from what you feel is a traditionally arts inclined background, even though now that I look back on it, as I said, I see all the ways in which I was privileged, that it was very gilded, but feeling that I wasn't necessarily from your typical arts background, I can see all the switches that you need to make for people on the way through. And I can see, especially like when you live in like small places, like Kilkenny City is a town that is insane about hurling. You know, that is like the primary interest of people who live in Kilkenny. So like completely sports mad. So in presenting an arts festival there, where, you know, you have a good cohort of the population who are definitely interested, already completely interested. But then you have a huge portion of the population that needs to be really invigorated to say, it's not a snooty thing, it's not elitist, come on, come to this outdoor Shakespeare, you're going to love it. So like I've been working on those sort of things, and that's where I get a complete sense of satisfaction, because when you bring somebody to something that like was slightly resistant or reluctant, and then you just see that it's flicked a switch and they're just going, wow, this is the most amazing transformative thing, you know. So I know about the kind of, I feel I know a bit about the kind of energy that you need to put into, you go out there, you know, you can't sit back. This is, you know, this is a seriously sophisticated and in-depth process that you need to do, that you need to just literally go out there and get people engaged, let them know absolutely that the door is open. So, and it is about, you know, that feeling. Any of the consultations that we've done, or in my previous job in Poetry Ireland, we had a great advisory group. And of course, the refrain that you would hear again and again is, you cannot be what you cannot see. So that, you know, if I can't see somebody like myself up there, I'm not going in there. You know, I'm just simply not going to dip my toe in the water there. So it's all those, you know, and it's also about putting a budget behind it, of course, Lorraine, you know. So it's not just about presenting the policy and saying, that's grand, we have our action plan, you know, we'll fund a few people. So it's about putting a serious budget behind it ourselves, and saying that we're going to work so intensively on this in the next few years, that, and having those targets so that we can look back on it in 18 months time and say, okay, how are we doing? You know, what more do we need to bring into play here? But all the time speaking to civil society bodies who are, you know, ahead of us in this space, to say, okay, where are the people that we need to be talking to? You know, what are the questions that we need to be asking people? Like doing an awful lot of listening, obviously, you know, and pushing those measures in place.
You know what often struck me as well, like sometimes you see, like even for me, the whole form filling is a real put off for me. There's been times when I thought, I'll just pay for it myself, or I'll just do it because the work needs to be done, rather than even go through all of that. And even like there's more funders now that will say, okay, you can make a video, but actually they're looking at the quality of the video. They're not, you know, and we judge people in the first 3 seconds that we meet people. That's just human nature, that happens. So if there's a pile of dishes in the sink, people are going to be immediately thinking, oh, well, you know, they got their pile of dishes. It might not even be their pile of dishes. They could be using someone else's phone. But all of those kind of things are barriers. And I often think, like, people can see who's doing the work out there. Like, you can see who's doing the work. How much of an opportunity is there for you, and I don't mean you yourself, but for the body that you represent, how much opportunity is there for you to go to artists, to organizations and say, look, we know you're doing great work. We'd really like to work in partnership with you to be able to expand that, or to be able to think about that. Because I was thinking, like last week I spoke to someone who works in development. I know lots of people, actually myself through work in life, that work in development, and it is a real art. It's a real art, knowing what the buzzwords are right now, knowing, you know, what tick boxing and all that. And I often think it's often so far removed from what happens on the ground. It would be much more valuable for funders to be able to work in partnership, to be able to look at, you know, what it is that they really feel like is value for money. What do you think about that, Maureen?
I completely agree. And I'll give you like a simple example from my most recent job in Poetry Ireland. So I mentioned that we'd had an advisory grouping, which were brilliant. And like, so we used to meet them every couple of months and say, okay, what should we be doing here? And a few of them said, listen, you should have an open mic night. And we thought, yeah, God, well, that's an easy thing to do. It's not madly expensive. And so we did, after a few months of planning, started an open mic night. I mean, it was immediately successful. Like, it was extraordinary. And that continues, well, virtually, I'm sure now, but we went on anyway for a good year when it could. And like, that brought so many new people to engage, to express themselves, to listen, to meet each other. Like, it was actually transformative. It was an incredible thing to observe. And like seeing in a way how easy that was actually, you know, loads of work went into it obviously, but it was easy, you know, like people said, you should do this. And we said, yeah, okay, let's do it. And so that it's the organizations on the ground that will help us, you know, because they're coming up, they're listening, they're hopefully taking the right advice, and they're going to be able to implement, to be able to devise programs like that with people who've previously been marginalized, you know. And it is too about us all kind of shaking ourselves from our normal way of thinking. You know, it's very easy for us to say, oh, well, I know the established companies, I know the established artists, you know, and you realize as you get older as well, you get locked into thinking about people who are a particular age up, you know, and look, we've all got to shake ourselves really from these kind of settled versions that we have of how the world works. So, you know, we've got to think about, okay, well, who is new, who's doing something different out there, you know, not to rely on the usual staples that we feel might make up the arts landscape, you know, just to open it up so that the landscape becomes much, much wider, more interesting, you know.
And the thing that kind of concerns me slightly, like, and I know, and it's an amazing thing that organizations, in order to get funding, have to be thinking about kind of diversity and inclusion. For me, I don't even like the word diversity, because that for me is about who holds the power, as opposed to, you know, when we're thinking about inclusion and representation. And the concerns I suppose I have sometimes, like in my day job, I work for an amazing organization, Clean Break, that works in arts and criminal justice. And I often think about, you know, when you are looking for funding for any kind of project that you're doing, and you're particularly talking about working with a really vulnerable or you know, marginalized group of people, it's almost like that they have to continue to live this label in order for you to get the funding. So, well, you know, and so that's a slight concern for me when I think about, because I see it again in the Irish government with, you know, the immigrant support program. It's amazing that organizations are now being asked to ensure that they're looking at that. But I am a little bit concerned about that. It's like, oh, that's the project for them, or, you know, we're making sure we have it to tick our boxes, and have we got enough now? You know, we've only got 5, do we need 6? Do you know what I mean? Like that is a concern for me. What's your thoughts around that?
Oh, I know, I completely understand why it is. Like, you know, when you think like we're such a junior country in a way, like when you think that the marriage bar existed up to 1973, you know, like it's not that far back. And when you think of all the mad things that we managed to excise from our society only recently, you know, and that's not to let us off the hook, sorry, but it's just to say, I suppose, why, God, it's so much of this thinking is new, and that's why we still have it over there sort of, and we can't bring it into the center. That's where we have to bring it into the center of our thinking. You know, we're still throwing off those, you know, old shackles that we had, you know, and we're doing it very quickly, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's such an exciting time to live in Ireland. I think it's an incredibly exciting time. But yeah, I absolutely take your point that, yeah, do the kind of funding schemes, that kind of, do the systems we've set up, do they just serve to keep people then in particular silos where, you know, well, that's grand to do my work with the disadvantaged, addicted women, and, you know, over here, you know, so yeah, that the thinking has to be far more organic in terms of, okay, this is my arts program, and, you know, one night I'm in the Gate Theatre, and the next night I'm doing my Clean Break work, and then the night after that I'm doing, you know, that it's all just completely parts of the same thing, that it's, you know, working towards the same aim, which is presenting the best arts for the widest possible audience. So that I completely agree with you that that's a risk for sure. So it's that switch in thinking that we have to get in people's heads as well, in terms of thinking, well, this is an absolute central part of the way I think about my organization. It's okay, what do I want my organization to look at, and what are the values? I mean, it's about embedding values, and if you values of openness and inclusion, which most arts organizations, I very much hope do. They should have. They absolutely have to have, you know.
Aren't they? Like, you know, creative organizations by nature are inclusive, but yet people are still not going in those doors. And I, you know, I say a lot, I have two different experiences when I go to Ireland. I can go to Ireland and absorb myself in an Afro-Caribbean environment, hear the music, eat the food, dance to the music, the clothes, the whole kind of thing. I mean, and yet, like, there still seems to be this kind of segregation in lots of ways. And you're right that, you know, we have come a long way, but actually, even when you think since the murder of George Floyd, you know, we've had all that outpouring across the globe, and yet racism is still on a rise, you know, particularly when we're looking in Dublin, it's still rising. And then when we go to more rural areas, you know, and the arts for me is like, for me, the arts really does change lives, and it really has got that capacity. So how can we, and I'm including myself in that, because I think, you know, I feel a little bit of a responsibility to it, actually, feeling like I want to do as much as I can to help make all those connections that you spoke about before, because that's the one thing I'm realizing. And I'm actually even thinking if that's an art in itself, Maureen, is because I know that everything I do is about, it's about elevating, it's about advocacy, it's about the people. It's about the people, and making the most of the people, and being able to do that, and giving people an opportunity to be able to listen and see and experience in a way that they might not have been able to before. And actually, when I really think about it, for me, it's like, it's about what it says on the tin. Like, for me, what you see is what you get with me. This is how I am in everything that I do, because I just think that, well, actually, personally speaking, I feel if we're all more transparent, we'd get along in a much better way. And I keep talking about the bring yourself to work. I think if we can bring our whole selves to whatever we're doing, we're in a far, you know, better place. But you know, what we're seeing is this kind of arena that says we want to see lived experience, we want to experience lived experience, but how can we really contextualize without stigmatizing?
Well, it's back to what you just said there, Lorraine, about the connection that people have with others. Like, the arts is obviously a very people-focused profession, and it is by people making those connections with each other. Like there's such honesty and truth, by and large, in the work that people make. If it's good, it's going to be true. You know, what's beautiful is true, I think. And that's why I think the arts can be especially good in terms of throwing the gates open wide, because it's back to the kind of human, it's that humanity and humility, hopefully, that's present in lots of really good work, that people can, that the empathy that's created amongst artists when they're really reaching out, and when they're being open, that can bring people in. I think, you know, going back to like the poetry open mic, like, people there felt welcome and at home. I know that for a fact. And I think lots of that was the art form, because poetry allows people to kind of bare their souls and to do it in a very receptive environment there. But it was also about the environment that we tried to create there, you know, and like, it was by having the right people in the room. They're like, that sounds elitist what I just said, but like, it was right, having the mix of people who were all focused on the same thing, who said, I want to go into a room for an hour and I want to listen to like raw emotion expressed in the best way possible. Some of it absolutely brilliant, really groundbreaking stuff. And I want to know that I'm in an environment where nobody will judge me, and where everyone's focused on the same thing. And I think it is, you know, then it becomes a place people can go, but like, there has to be many layers of that, you know. to answer your question about how do you not stigmatize it, you know, it has to be populated, it all has to grow up together alongside, so that it's not just, oh, well, God, I head off kind of with my head down to the poetry open mic once a month and that's my sanctuary. You know, there has to be so much more of that so that it's mainstream, it's all mainstream, you know. Just back to your, like, the responsibility, there's a quote, I'm sure it's a well-known one, but Toni Morrison's, the function of freedom is to free someone else, you know, so that here we all are, beautifully free, you know, wonderfully endowed. Look at the role I have, look at what the Arts Council has, great support, you know, increasing support. So we're in a really strong position to make big changes, you know. There's another lovely, I'm going to make a hames of the pronunciation. She's a Zimbabwean novelist, but it's just, I saw her say this recently. She's an activist and she was arrested recently. So her name is something like Tsitsi Dangarembga, I think, but I can send you the reference. Yeah, thank you. So she said, every moment is a moment for potential resolution. It just needs somebody to say in that moment, okay, we're going to do things differently and mean it. And it's just so simple, but it's just like, yeah, you know, that's how you change things.
And it is that, isn't it? And again, it goes back to that honesty, because that is really what it is. I feel like, I mean, there's so many things I still want to ask you, and you know, when I'm thinking about the Irish arts, not just the Irish arts, actually, I think it's kind of wherever, and particularly with Irish society, there tends to be, for me, an inner circle and an outer circle. And I've spoken about this before. And if you're in the inner circle, it's great, and you get really connected in the inner circle. How do we get those that are on the outer circle into the inner circle? And even when they're in the inner circle, because we know, you know, in lots of areas of the arts in Ireland, there is a glass ceiling, particularly when we're looking for those who identify as being Afro-Irish, mixed Irish, Asian Irish. But there is a glass ceiling. How do we break that ceiling? I feel like I want to smash it to bits. How do we do that?
It's like advocacy, it's, you know, it's getting to the center and it's talking to those people and absolutely showing them what the responsibility is, you know. And I think, like, people will, you know, like, I have a great belief in the goodness of humankind, you know, like unconscious bias is like present in every single one of us, you know. It's, you know, some of us are waking up sooner than others, you know, but it's getting to the center and, like, look at us, we're at the center of things. We're in a really good position here to make serious changes now with people, you know, but just to work with the others who are in the center and to bring people in, to bring them in meaningfully, you know, not just like, grand, I'll chat with you every 2 months and that'll keep me, you know, that'll satisfy my responsibility or my sense of responsibility to that. It's really by Evan Boland, the late poet, who was just brilliant and died tragically this year, very suddenly, but she talked about poetry not being a fiefdom, that it's a city whose gates stand wide. And I mean, she worked all through the 70s, 80s and 90s to make sure that women were in this city of poetry. You know, I mean, bizarre, isn't it, that, you know, 51% of the population were locked out of this art form for much of the earlier part of the century, you know. But it's about, you know, getting in there, making sure that we who are in the centre are fully aware of our responsibility and of the resources that we have to change it. Yeah,
what I'm finding though is, like, because I feel like sometimes I have to calm myself in that circle, because I feel like I'm kind of only half in. I'm not like in. I'm not in that circle yet. I've got an elbow in, yeah, and I'm making as much room at the elbow as I possibly can with that elbow. But I feel like if people really see my elbow in the way my elbow is, they get scared sometimes, because they're like, oh, you know, it feels like a responsibility that people are feeling a bit nervous about. And maybe that goes back to the unconscious bias, or people feeling like, you know, I want to do this work, but then when somebody is really calling them out on, you know, how are you doing it, or are you really doing it? sometimes people shy away from that. And I'm saying sometimes because I'm not taking away, there's some incredible work and individuals. And I see, like, when, for me, even being here in this platform, you know, and Access, Mark O'Brien is an incredible ally, as is all of the team actually at Access. Gary Dunn in the London Irish Centre, Hannah, there's so many, actually, I'm not even going to start calling names because there's so many people that are incredible allies and actually take a massive risk even in giving people those kind of opportunities. And I suppose for me, I'm inviting more and more people to take those kind of risks because the arts are all about taking risks. Now, sorry, you were going to say something more.
No, but I was just going to say, if we can't be innovative in the arts, where can you be? You know, like, we're starting with a blank page every day. So it's the ideal forum for people to take risks, you know, and as you say, when you look at the work that Access is doing, it's absolutely brilliant. And it's just about just making sure for us in the Arts Council that we absolutely encourage this, resource it as well as we can, and, you know, mainstream it like that, so that more and more people get to see it. And, you know, it's switching people onto it. It's just encouraging all the time. Or, you know, back to Toni Morrison.
Like on a personal level, the Access are incredible, not just through this residency and not just because I'm here talking to you on their platform. I've been around Access for a number of years now, and you know, I immediately just felt at home there, just the warmth and the way that they work actually for me feels like a real model of good practice. I talk about it here in London all the time. I just think it's an incredible space, and the way that they work with community in that space is incredible. But because of time, there's one question that I want to ask you. And for me, that's like, what do you see as the biggest challenge that there is in the arts right now in terms of thinking about, I mean, I know, you know, money is, and we really need to save the arts, particularly the impact that COVID has had on our industry is, yeah, I feel it here even when I'm thinking about that. But if we're thinking like blue sky, but, you know, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge when we're thinking about inclusion and representation and, you know, really kind of thinking about the identity of Irish arts and culture and how we grow and harness that? What do you feel like is the biggest challenges around that?
Yeah, I think playing catch up, keeping a pace, making sure that we make redress for all the missed decades where people have felt outside the gates, making sure, you know, it's so striking to me how much of Irish experience has not been reflected through the arts. So how can we catch up to make sure that that experience is properly reflected through the complete range, the panoply of voices that should be there. So, you know, it makes our objective all the more urgent, because we've missed out on so many voices, you know, across any number, you know, across the range of marginalized communities. We've missed so many. So I think it's time for us now just to wake up and say, we're not going to allow that happen, you know, and that in 20 years, I want to look at an Irish art scene that's actually truly representative of Irish society, and that, you know, is so much richer for that. Like, it's absolutely thrilling to think what that's going to be like. I mean, that's going to be incredible. Like, that's going to be something to absolutely celebrate.
It really is. Maureen, because we're kind of running out of time, and I want to give you space just in case that there's anything that we haven't talked about tonight that you feel like is something really burning that you want to say.
I suppose, like, when I worked in Poetry Ireland, the Poetry Ireland is developing this incredible building in the north inner city. So it's traditionally quite a disadvantaged part of the city. And I used to live in that part of the city myself years ago, and I worked around there like 20 years ago. And it's the most energizing part of the city, I think. I used to walk up O'Connell Street, and like you'd have this feeling, this wash of humanity, like just a truly diverse population that you would just come to know and come to encounter every single day. And it just felt to me like that was emblematic of everything that the Irish art scene could be. And like we were doing our best to like get as many people as possible in the local community engaged with what we were doing. And like that was just thrilling. And the Walt Whitman has the wonderful short line from Walt Whitman, "We contain multitudes." And you know, that's it. Like society contains multitudes. Like, isn't that what makes life thrilling? There's so many different sorts of people. It's just, it's absolutely thrilling. And like to reflect that difference in what we do, in what we can enable others to do is brilliant. It's a complete privilege. And I mean, it's something that I'm bent on us acting on in the future.
Well, I feel massively excited that you are at the helm of Arts Council Ireland. I am now, you know, feel like I'm expecting great things for Irish arts. I know that's going to take time to embed. Of course, it is just, you know, even being in with all of your team right now would be an impossibility for you. So I can imagine that they're all really looking forward to you kind of, you know, taking your seat and seeing what's going to happen for Ireland, and not just for Ireland in Ireland, but for Irish people globally, because Irish arts is so rich, our culture is so rich, that it is in lots of ways what keeps us united. You know, all 80 million people of Irish descent across the world is what we love so much about being Irish. It's what, you know, when we think about home, we think about our culture, we think about our arts. So Maureen, I'm delighted to have you here tonight. I just want to acknowledge that I know, like Colette, one of the things Colette has said tonight is that she writes because it's what she loves. And I think that feels like a nice note to leave on, because I think that within the arts, for all of us that works in the arts, we're in it because we love it. We're not often in it because we're earning loads, because we're just not. You know, no matter what job you're doing in the arts, we're not earning what you'd be earning in a commercial organization. So we're in it because we love it. Maureen, thank you so much for your honesty, for bringing all that to the table. Delighted to hear you with so many quotes. I often think about that as an artist. I must have my quotes up my sleeve. I just don't. I can't even remember them in the moment. I'll remember them afterwards. But it's lovely to talk to you tonight, Maureen. And I really hope that we'll have another opportunity, maybe this time next year or the year after, when you've had an opportunity to get your feet under the table and get things going. Maureen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And listen, best of luck. It's brilliant that you're doing this, and it's brilliant that you can do the residency, and well done you, and well done Access, and Mark and Kate and Niamh and all the brilliant people there. They're absolutely fantastic. So they're lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have them. So very best of luck with it all.
Thank you very much. Good night to everyone at home. I look forward to seeing you back here again this time next week, 8 o'clock.